ProRevenge, collection of stories. Ruined. For some reason, God knows why, I thought I would trust a very small and local credit union with some of my money. When recently my card did not work at the ATM, I asked for help inside the branch, and a clerk gave me a code to use that would deduct cash directly from my account. This is a feature the bank has. I was not receiving special treatment. Fast forward a few days, it seems the bank's system flagged my account for review because of some accounting error being late to deduct my balance. I did not go into overdraft or anything. It was just a minor mistake on their side. And still, for over 1 month, all my funds were locked, and whenever I called my bank support, I was given snarky responses, sometimes even hinting that they did not like my foreign-sounding last name. When I spoke to my family back home to vent about this situation, a younger cousin came up with an idea. Use some Russian service that pays people a few Russian rubles. 1 ruble is approximately 1 United States dollar cent for reference, each time to post whatever you ask them on social media. This service worked like magic. The website even had the option to choose between American-looking profiles and other locales. After the most well-spent $3 of my life and some AI prompts later, the credit union's social media were flooded with hundreds of complaints. I am sure this got to the right ears because on the same day, the bank's call center manager personally called me to say they understand my frustration, and even if I do not want my account anymore, the bank is ready to initialize a transfer of my full balance plus $50 compensation to any other bank of my choosing. Problem solved. They probably also realized there is no way to link this activity to me and hence hinted at ending things on a positive note. Too bad I cannot tell the Russian bots to remove their posts. That will be someone else's problem now. Write what you think about this story, and we'll move on to the next one. Classmate got pranked by a fake letter after betraying us. This is a very old story of revenge from when I was a teenager in the 1990s. There were only a few personal computer gamers around at the time, and without the internet, it was hard to get hold of new games. My friend and I bought games from abroad via airmail because local stores did not sell many, but these were not cheap. We would trade them with each other and would copy the copy protection, which was often included, so this made it somewhat affordable for us. A new kid joined our class, however, and his uncle had a large collection of games we did not have. We offered to trade games with him and gave him our original copies for him to copy, and in return, we got corrupted floppy disks, yes, this was the 1990s, missing copy protection, and so on. After a few months of this, we received not a single working game, while he had received all of our games, including the Settlers, Doom 2, Monkey Island games, and others, some of which he returned in less than good condition. We had had enough, and we wanted to get revenge, but we did not know how. The 1990s were known for the many AIDS campaigns after Freddie Mercury died of AIDS in 1991. I was a huge fan of Queen, and this new friend would often mock me for liking a homosexual singer. He came from a very conservative family, and his mother was quite Catholic. This gave us an idea when we had to attend an AIDS event organized by a certain foundation with our class. At the end, we were given flyers about AIDS, homosexuality, and other topics, and free condoms with the logo of the AIDS Foundation were available. We each grabbed a few for reasons you will soon read below. My friend and I were among the very few with a computer and an inkjet printer at home, so we got this idea to trick him. We created a fake letter addressed to our friend, pretending we were the AIDS Foundation, copying the logo and everything to make it look as authentic as possible. It went something like this. Dear first name, thank you for your letter. We understand it is difficult being open about being homosexual, and you have many questions after the event you attended with your class. Please find enclosed a flyer which should answer many of your questions as well as some condoms. Please practice safe sex at all times. We enclosed all the flyers we had gotten at the event, as well as the condoms, and mailed it to Mr. Last Name to guarantee his father would open the letter first. We had no idea the chaos this would create. We knew, given his homophobic views, this would be great revenge, but apparently his mother was in tears, screaming, his father was angry, and he was grounded for weeks, with his parents convinced he was homosexual. In the end, he figured we had something to do with it because we had been carefully inquiring to see if our prank had succeeded, but at first he thought the letter was authentic and that we had contacted the foundation in his name. When we finally confessed we had faked it all, we had a meeting with the principal to explain why we had done this, with his parents present. It is still the best revenge I ever took in my life, even though it was 30 years ago. Write what you think about this story, and we'll move on to the next one. Hurt my friend? Good luck with your education. Back in the days before the internet became widespread, when it was still a novel concept with great potential, I was enrolled at my local junior college. A short time into the semester, I moved in with my girlfriend to save on rent. I will refer to my girlfriend as Lucy for the purposes of this story. One evening, Lucy mentioned that she had invited a friend from one of her classes to join us for a game night. That sounded like a great idea to me. We also invited a few other friends, and it turned out to be a really enjoyable evening. Surprisingly, Lucy's friend, whom I will call Sarah, was someone I knew from high school. We were not close friends, but we were acquainted and got along well. After that evening, Sarah started coming over quite often for dinner, game nights, or to watch movies. She even brought her boyfriend, whom I will call Jay, a couple of times. However, Jay never quite fit in. He was quiet or standoffish, did not engage much, and seemed like he didn't want to be there. It was evident that no one felt comfortable having him around, but we invited him to be polite to Sarah. Fortunately, he only came over 2 or 3 times and found excuses to decline every other invitation. About 1 or 2 months after this began, Sarah called Lucy crying and asked if she could come over. Of course, we said yes. Sarah explained that Jay had become very upset with her for visiting our place so frequently and accused her of cheating on him. She did not clarify whether he thought she was cheating with me, Lucy, or both, but any of those accusations were absurd and untrue. However, Jay confronted her, verbally assaulted her, and called her all sorts of nasty names. At one point, when she tried to walk past him to leave, he shoved her back. This caused her to trip over a coffee table, fall, and sustain a large bruise on her buttocks and lower back. Lucy told me about the bruise, as Sarah had shown it to her. I did not see it myself. Sarah insisted that Jay had never physically assaulted her before and believed it was an accident, but I was furious. I wanted revenge. You do not mess with my friends, and you certainly do not assault women. I considered confronting him physically, but although I am a large person, I have never been in a fight and am not violent by nature. Nevertheless, a plan for revenge formed in my mind. At the time, I was working as a student employee in the administration building of the college. As part of my job, I had access to student records, including fees and class schedules. The deadline to drop or add classes without penalty or special permission was approaching, so I looked up Jay in the system, obtained his student identification number and other necessary information, and put my plan into action. On the last day to change schedules, I used the dedicated enrollment phones in the administration building, as online class scheduling was not yet available, and canceled all his classes. Additionally, I enrolled him in every class I could find that had a course fee. If you owed a debt to the college, you could not obtain copies of your transcripts or other documents. I should mention that Jay was an international student and needed to maintain a certain number of course units to remain in the country. I wish I could provide more details about the consequences, but to avoid being traced, I did not tell anyone about my actions, nor did I check his records again for some time. However, I did get some satisfaction. Sarah was worried about seeing Jay again, as she had broken up with him the night after he pushed her, and they shared an English class on Tuesdays. She mentioned that on the following Tuesday, Jay was present, but there was also a new student in the class who had to stand because there weren't enough seats. The teacher took attendance and discovered that Jay was not on the official roster. Apparently, after I dropped all his classes, someone on the wait list was admitted. Jay tried to argue with the teacher, but since the teacher had the official roster and Jay was not listed, there was nothing he could do. Sarah said she never saw Jay in that class again. I don't know much more about what happened afterward. Lucy and I eventually parted ways, so I didn't see Sarah often after that. Sometime later, I checked Jay's class schedule and found that all the classes with course fees had been removed, but he was not enrolled in any other classes either. I wanted to believe he was expelled from the college, but I did not attempt to confirm it. In any case, Sarah no longer had to share a class with him, and while he likely deserved worse, he was certainly inconvenienced and possibly expelled from the college. Sometimes I wonder if I was too harsh, but then I recall that he deserved it. You can mess with me, but not with my friends. Write what you think about this story, and we'll move on to the next one. Boss said contractors are disposable. Big mistake. I worked an engineering contract for a while. They were pretty open-ended, like many were, with a vague but not binding length specified. It was kind of like, this contract is expected to be for 12 months, but it is at the will of the employer and could end earlier or be extended further. But for those who do that kind of work, usually they stick to the vague timelines, and many well-performing contractors get extended. Anyway, one day our team of 10, all contractors, managed by one full-time employee, let 3 of the contractors go. And they had me do it. Technically, I was running that team, but I was a contractor too, and not in charge of any firing like that. So they were told, this is your last day at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Another contractor and I asked our sponsor, "Hey, how come we didn't give those guys any notice?" He said brightly, "That's why we hire contractors, so we can cut them loose at a moment's notice whenever we want to." We didn't love that answer. Also, it was a weird thing to say to two other contractors. He basically told us we would get no notice and be let go instantly someday. Anyway, long story short, that other contractor was a very sharp guy. He started interviewing and got another job. He told me about it, and I didn't tell anyone else. It started in a few weeks. He just kept right on working the contract job and was right in the middle of a bunch of work that only he understood. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon, on his last day, he just stood up, grabbed his laptop, mouse, and docking station, walked to our sponsor's desk, and set them down. He just said, "Hey, thanks for everything. This is my last day." The guy said, "Wait, you're leaving?" And he just said, "Yes, thanks," and walked out. That was it. He did also hit send on a more official last day email at the same time, too. It was really funny. His work was half done, he didn't answer any calls or questions about it, and it took us about a month to figure it all out and get that project back on track. If the sponsor hadn't been so delighted about being able to fire contractors at any second, that guy would definitely have given a nice 2-week notice and worked to have a smooth handoff of his work. Cool story from comments. I work in construction and have had coworkers fired with no notice. My boss, the owner, said that he was not required to give any notice in our industry. I worked for that company for more than 10 years. When the writing was in the wall for me to move on, I worked my shift and found my boss at the end and told him I was done, effective immediately. He practically begged me to stay and train a replacement for the machine I run daily. I told him he had 10 years to figure out a backup, and since I no longer work for him, it was none of my business. He asked why I didn't give any notice, and I regurgitated his line about no notice required in our industry. My favorite part of the conversation was when he asked if I could at least come in for a few complicated jobs that week, and I said it was akin to breakup sex and no. Write what you think about this situation. Also, if you like this video, give a thumbs up, subscribe, and turn on the bell to receive notifications about the latest videos. See you next time. Bye-bye.